Hi, and welcome to the Business Academy at Indiana University Northwest. This is our 2023 online Zoom conversations, and we're glad that you were here to join us. We also have with us today HelenMarie Harmon. She is the Director of Career Development, founder and director of the STARS Peer Mentoring Experience Program, and professor of career development in the School of Business and Economics at Indiana University Northwest, where she teaches first year through senior year career success and development courses. HelenMarie is also a certified Myers-Briggs type indicator and a strong interest inventory consultant and practitioner. In addition to presenting locally, nationally, and internationally, she has worked with numerous nonprofit community groups as well as K through 12 students on career selection, motivation, academic and workplace success, and overall personal growth and development. Her expertise and interest areas include resume writing, interviewing processes, mentoring, presentation skills, and overall professional success. I am Jana Zostek, Director of the Business Academy at IU Northwest, and I'm excited to have HelenMarie here with me today to talk about business etiquette. So welcome.
Thank you, Jana. It's a pleasure to be here and to do this conversation with you. I'm excited.
Me too. I think this is such an important topic for not only our students, but all professionals, the professionals of Northwest Indiana who we specifically want to reach, as well as those outside of Indiana. So it's such an interesting but wide topic that we've chosen to talk about today. So maybe we can narrow it down a little bit in what we talk about. I know that you've brought some slides for us to look at, so why don't we dive into your first slide and see what we can uncover there.
Excellent. That's a great way to start. Let me go ahead and get over to this. So, uh, are we just going to run through the slide, or would you like to ask me a question, or should we just get going? What would you like to do?
Give an overview of the slides and then we can talk about the topics in a little bit more depth.
Awesome. So, etiquette, as Jana mentioned, it is wide and varied, and this will be kind of a nice surface conversation into the topic. There are lots of little finer details and so many resources and opinions and ways in which an individual can best address their etiquette. And a lot of it is situational. So please keep that in mind as we go through. A lot of it is uh, you have the basics as you walk into an environment, but then you have to play with the situation at hand and adjust accordingly. And that often, as I tell my students, takes practice. You might fumble a little bit initially. Um, Hopefully not such a big faux pas that you're going to be negatively impacted by that. Hopefully this will give you some of that template of standards to adhere to. But there could be times in which, it's an unfamiliar surrounding or you've never interacted with a particular individual in that position, or you're just not feeling it that day. These are things that come into play and it's all really okay. Um, so to start off, a little bit of what etiquette is, it's really that proper behavior in the workplace. It's how we make our environment for us and the others around us comfortable, pleasant, happy, respectful, and it's really that indicator of showing good manners and proper respect for yourself and others. So a few of the basics that I have here on the screen, it starts with dressing for success. And that really is a big, it's a big one in the sense of it really kind of could impact how we then are seen by others in the workplace or in the environment as much as it does impact our delivery of information and how we see ourselves. So there's an old adage that I do tell my students, that never really dress for the position that you have, dress for the position that you aspire to. At the same time, never really outdressing your superior, but maybe dressing to match that superior. So we have another little slide later on about attire, but it's really, you know, covering up parts of our anatomy that need to be covered up, right? Staying with attire that fits us appropriately. That's a little bit on trend, but not too trendy. Clothing that is appropriate for our age. One thing that somebody reminded me a long time ago is the fact that simply because they make something in your size doesn't necessarily mean that you should be wearing it. It's for that event, perhaps, or for that occasion. So that whole element of dressing for success.
I think that, so a couple thoughts come to mind for me. One is, you really do feel differently. You really do carry yourself differently when you are dressed, effectively for that workplace. Or I know for myself, I carry myself differently when I'm in blue jeans and a t-shirt compared to how I carry myself when I'm in a suit. So I think that's, if you're not a person that likes to dress up, give it a try. Um, dress for success at work and see how different it makes you feel, because it really does make you feel differently. And then the other thing I wanted to say is, you had mentioned this. I remember you saying this a while ago about how you're dressing for an interview, not for a night out on the town, not for bar hopping or whatever. There is a difference. Dressing up for the situation. You need to think about the situation you're dressing for.
Absolutely. And I can comment more, Jana, you and I can comment probably more so on the female side of that, right? And the female side is typically the one that gets the most misconstrued messages out there for how we see individuals portrayed in, you know, whatever's hot on Netflix, or whatever's like the new movie that's out there, on how, some of our female executives may dress in the workplace. And then the female clothing lines are the ones that tend to follow more of the trends, right? And so things are constantly changing, more so for the female side than it might be for the male side, right? We don't want to gender stereotype here by any means, but I think those watching may understand the comment being made here, right? And so for women, especially my female students in class, it is a very difficult message to convey. Number one, they're college students, so they're very used to wearing comfy clothes, right? Sweatshirts, hoodies, cutoffs in the summer, things of that nature, just because the college environment would allow that in the classroom. Then to transition into that first interview or that workplace, it's a complete culture shift, right? To get them to invest in a whole different line of style and attire than maybe they have currently in their closet. Um, and for gentlemen, it's the same kind of concept, because it's the idea of suits, right? And getting that proper fitting of suits that aren't too long, and that they're okay going to a tailor and having them, appropriately adjusted, rather than purchasing off the rack. And there's lots of little intricacies that go into that, all the way down to accessories, right? The type of briefcase you would carry, or the handbag, the shoes, the jewelry, the hairstyle, the makeup, all this kind of runs through that dress for success image. I don't know if we have more comments on, I mean, that's a whole web session in and of itself, is just, right and wrong pictures we could display, and talking about places where we could get these materials, and shopping and so forth, and working within a budget. And keep in mind that some companies are very, very specific on workplace attire. So that's something else that you'd have to adhere to. Some of your Fortune 100 companies, Fortune 500 companies, do allow a clothing allowance for their employees because they have to match this, Excalibur standard of dressing. So there's all the different kinds of situational uh, concepts that come in when we talk about workplace attire, etiquette, what we wear, and as much as what we say, what we don't wear,
Right.
for sure.
Well, that's
Um,
a pretty in-depth topic. Next you have on the list is be on time.
we do. Yes, I went off a lot on the dressing for success. That's a big one. So being on time, this is another big one as well, in the sense of if you're on time, they say that you're late. So you should plan to arrive, a 15-minute window is considered prior to the start of an engagement. That 15-minute window, that's considered on time. So that you have a little bit of an allowance, give and take there, so that once that clock strikes that certain hour, you're already there and you might already be halfway prepped to start your day, to start the meeting, to start the interview. Um, Now, again, taking for we all do our best to account for, traffic conditions and weather conditions. And there are so many unknowns that still can occur once we get into our vehicle or once we traverse across, a neighborhood or whatnot. So we do our best to be on time and be respectful of the others who are waiting for us to be there on time. One thing that I've also learned as well is if you do, unfortunately, arrive a few minutes late, um, don't say sorry, right? Sorry, I'm late, because that just draws attention to the fact that you're late. You can change that terminology and you can say, thank you for waiting for me. Thank you for giving me an extra minute to arrive, something of that nature. So you're appreciating and respecting the individual or the colleagues that you were interacting with, as opposed to drawing attention to maybe your mismanagement of time. And I don't know, Jane, if you have any thoughts on that as well?
That's great advice. I love that. I there have been many times that I have traveled to the location I needed to go to the day before, the week before. I map it and do the street views so that I'm familiar with this, what I'm going to see and how I'm going to find where I'm going. So if it's unfamiliar, I think that taking that extra step to make sure that you know where you're going is super important as well.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more with that. Even if you think you know where something is, if you need to clarify uh, for nerves or whatnot, it doesn't hurt to just verify that they're on that corner or they're on the third floor in the building or whatnot to get yourself there on time. Excellent point. Absolutely.
And even making sure you know where you're going, because
Mhm.
you assume that a business is in X location and you don't realize they've moved, then you've got a problem. So I think it's a good habit to even confirm the address of where you're going when you make the appointment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even within your own, here on our campus, for example, sometimes we have to verify where certain conference rooms are because there are certain ones that are in like little nooks and crannies of departments that we don't necessarily visit. And we want to make sure that we're finding that right location and clarifying. The third point that we have on here is respecting everyone, right? There are going to be, as we all have encountered and will continue to interact with in our life, individuals with varied backgrounds. Everyone has their own history, everyone has their level of education and their economic status and their family background and so forth and so on. And everyone is different. And as we are, right? So when we walk into an environment, we want to be treated with that level of respect as much as we give to others to do that. Um, and that comes down to, and I think this is shown again, because a lot of etiquette tips kind of blend together, right? We can't segment everything without blending into something else. But this comes down to uh, pure elements of treat others as you would expect to be treated. Listen to our colleagues, clients, coworkers, new interactions that you have in networking events, and really ask others information about themselves that they're comfortable with sharing, and just be open, be aware, be accepting, and then ask appropriate questions as follow-up as needed so that you get to know each other, right? And that really helps to create a level of comfort for all involved, and it also creates a level of interest. People like to interact with people who are interested in them, and then it also kind of allows that ability to practice good um, etiquette, professionalism, relationship building skills.
Absolutely. I, this is this is, I think, the one topic that if you're going to take anything away from this presentation, this is it. Everyone is different. Everyone is different. If you look at the world through the lens that is your experiences, that's what we all do. Then there is no one on the planet that has experienced life the same way as you have. Yeah, that is one of my major points for anyone, for all my students as well, is to understand everyone has had a different life, and that life affects how we look at situations. Yeah, great point.
Absolutely. It's how we interact, react, and just overall get along with others. And it's paramount. Everything is that's our foundation. Everything stems from that. And that goes along with the next point, which is being friendly. Just being open, having a nice smile on your face, making good eye contact. We have the image here of the handshake, which we'll talk about as well. So being able to greet appropriately, um, holding the door for somebody who's walking into the building behind you, saying good morning, saying it's nice to meet you, just, and that ties right again. Here we are kind of intertwining our points here. That goes along with good manners and just those niceties that unfortunately sometimes we take for granted, sometimes we feel too rushed. And regardless of how the person on the opposite end responds to that, because not everybody even cares that you hold the door for them and they may not say thank you, that's on them. We were indicating and practicing good etiquette and manners, and that reflects upon us. And that makes us a better professional overall because we're doing what is the right thing to do. And then hopefully that will bleed through and allow others to do the right thing the next time they have a chance. I
Yeah,
don't know, Jane, if you have any, those three bullets, those last three kind of all really tie in together. It's hard to segment them aside.
no, but this was a great discussion, I think, to just introduce this topic and how important it is.
Absolutely.
So what do we have to talk about next?
Well, next, let's see. Magical. The 5 qualities of successful professional employees. So these are kind of those 5 qualities. And again, a lot of it we've kind of touched on already in some level. So the first one is conscientiousness. So this is, doing your best work all the time, doing what you can deliver in the best way possible, um, being efficient in what you do, being, kind of that care for your work, right? So one thing I also tell my students is, before you put your name on a task, before you put your name on an assignment and turn it in, take a look at it. And is this your best work? Because your name is going right along with that. So whatever you put your name to, does it represent you the best way possible? And I don't know, Jana, would you agree with that? I'm sure you tell your students the same thing as well in some regard, especially with the topics that you teach.
Yes, absolutely. Um, you people notice. People absolutely notice. Employers notice, teachers notice, even people who maybe don't have any authority over you, they're going to notice what you're putting out into the world. And that's where opportunities come from too. When someone sees you really exceeding expectations for whatever it is you're doing, that's going to resonate with them. And that might end up being an opportunity at some point down the road as well.
Absolutely. You want to get noticed for the right things, uh, never really recognized for the wrong things, right? Because that's where, maybe a promotion could come in, or maybe, hey, I want you to meet this person and the networking takes off, or an opportunity presents itself. The next one on here is courteousness, right? Being courteous. This is using appropriate language, speaking and writing clearly, that idea of being on time again, being punctual, so you're aware of others' timelines as well. And this is where we get into things like apologizing. Uh, take onus for uh, a task that maybe didn't go the way you had hoped, or maybe it was, you bumped into somebody in the elevator, and just saying, I'm sorry, I didn't realize my bag was so big, or something like that. Um, and this is where we practice active listening, right? Where we let others kind of share their stories and we take in the information before responding. The next one is tact, being tactful. So, because we are interacting with people who are different from us, we have to also at the same time realize what we are triggered by. And sometimes somebody says something, or someone interacts a certain way, or something like that. We have to take a deep breath and be very, okay with the situation at hand and not overreact. Um, I guess I'm going to put this on actual recording. I'm a bit of a germaphobe, and folks close to me know that I am. And when I see, individuals say in a buffet line or networking line, and they do something with the utensil that now I'm expected to touch right after them, rather than calling them out on that kind of maybe not as hygienic way of interacting with a utensil, I will bypass it and maybe politely go to an attendant and say, could we have a fresh spoon, or could we have a fresh set of tongs? I drop these, so I take onus for it rather than calling out my colleague to do that. So Jana, I know you and I know each other quite well, so you could probably have your own webinar on Helen's germaphobe situation problems, but how do you feel about that?
Uh, I actually feel the same way. Here, I'll put this on recording. I feel the same way, Ellen. Um, people don't necessarily think about other people that are going to be affected by their behavior. And so how do you deal with that? Do you make a scene, or are you professional and look for other ways to deal with that situation? So uh, there are multiple ways to deal with any problem, and there are professional ways and there are unprofessional ways. So
Absolutely. And our world is filled with both, our environments are filled with both, and we want to put more of the tact into the world and reduce the other side of it for sure.
and the last 3 years, I think has opened a lot of eyes to the fact that we can negatively impact people through bad hygiene and health habits, and we should we should be respectful of people in that way to protect people. When you're sick, don't come to work.
Absolutely.
Things like that. I think we're more mindful of it now than we were 3 years ago.
I agree. I agree. Um, Ethical is the next kind of quality of being a professional. I titled, I think, the slide before this one, Successful Professional Employee. I think this is simply a successful professional, just simply being that business leader or that small business owner. These are those qualities that kind of roll into that as well. Successful student, pursuing higher education, etc. So our next point on here is ethics, and this is you know, being honest, being open, again, taking onus for a mistake. We all make some sort of mistake, right? And we've had it experienced. It could be as simple as the email chain where you hit reply all and you were saying a maybe one-off kind of like, oh, here we go again, comment to your colleague because there was going to be another meeting or another, carnival or something like that. And you meant to only share that with your one colleague. Um, and it went to reply all. You can pull that back and you can say, oh my gosh, I was so excited that we're going to have another one of these. Whatnot, sent that out there. But it's kind of taking onus to that error of judgment in the moment. Um, and this is also, respecting confidentiality. A lot of times in environments, we have a situation, it could be a financial situation of a client, it could be a payroll situation of an employee, it could be, an argument between two individuals in the workplace and they've come to you to resolve it. Whatever that situation might be, that sense of ethics is maintaining that confidentiality and adhering to somebody's trust who has come to you. And Jane, I don't know, this is definitely in your wheelhouse for what you instruct our students on. So I'm interested in your take on this as well.
Sure. E- I think ethics also ties into that conscientiousness that you need to be aware of what's happening around you. Being drawn into unethical behavior can be very subtle, like a boss telling you to do something a certain way that you know is not correct, but you have that pressure from the supervisor. The boss is telling me to do it this way. And you may incorrectly think that, well, since the boss told me to do it this way, they're the ones who are responsible. And that's not going to be the case. So you are the one who will be responsible for your behavior in the workplace and outside of the workplace. And so when you're told to do something that is not ethical or that is illegal, you need to ask yourself, am I willing to go to jail for
Mm,
this boss that just told me to do something that's improper? So bottom line is you have to be aware. You have to be aware of what's happening around you and question, ask yourself whether that's appropriate behavior or not.
absolutely. And this is being also, I like what you said about that awareness, Jana, because this also has to do with your own set of values, right? So being aware of what you value in the workplace, what you value in your life. And sometimes if there's an extreme conflict, as Jana mentioned, sometimes that means that you have to follow an appropriate procedure to address that situation. And sometimes it requires doing some self-reflection and making some maybe hard decisions. If you can kind of see that this is the way, as Jana mentioned that example, that your employer is going to continue moving forward. Is that something that you want to continue to be a part of? Or can it be addressed and remedied in another way for all to win? And then the last element on here that we have is being presentable, and I think we covered that in the previous slide, and that has to do with all those kinds of kindness elements and friendly demeanor and the attire that we wear, the handshake, how we interact in public, those kinds of just elements of image, if you will, which is a big part of how we are seen and how we present ourselves as a professional.
All wonderful tips for making sure that you are presenting yourself in a professional way.
Absolutely. And there's a lot. There's so many different layers and there's so many different elements that go into all of this. It's really, again, hard to segment it, and you can't just check a box and say, okay, I'm done with this, I'm moving on. Sometimes you have to go back to that previous box and blend it in with the next box and continue to keep to work the elements. So this slide, I basically found one that kind of talked a little bit about attire. This is one that I show to my students for their interview process or their first day on the job. And we could again have a long conversation about attire and how we kind of are seen by others. And Jana already mentioned as well how this impacts how we perform, right? In kind of how we carry ourselves and how we can, take charge of the room based upon our attire, because it gives us that level of confidence. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, we don't have to find clothing that is outside of our budget, right? Because we have to work within a budget that we have. And there's lots of creative ways that, you could do this. Sometimes when individuals are changing positions, or they are changing their sizes due to different life situations. Maybe in your environment, in your neighborhood, with a bunch of other parents at your children's school, you could do kind of a clothing exchange, and you could simply, exchange items of wear, things that we don't necessarily want anymore, but somebody else might. Here on campus, we presently have a clothing closet as a startup initiative. A lot of college campuses have that to address the issues of those college students, again, going out for that first interview and trying to not squeeze that budget too tightly too quickly. A lot of my students and my colleagues have found great items at, Goodwill or a resale shop that are, definitely less cost than retail, etc. So lots of different ways to kind of meet that budget. Um, a couple very basic things to keep in mind is just, again, from the female perspective, make sure that when you sit, if you're wearing a skirt, for example, it's always a good idea, I tell my students, to sit in front of a full length mirror on a straight back, maybe dining room chair, which is very similar to the kind of environment you'll be in a workplace or a networking event or something, and see what reflects back on you. Because sometimes when we sit, the shirt, the skirt shifts up a little bit, the blouse might drop down a little bit, and you want to make sure that that's not happening. For gentlemen, the same thing. When you have your suit buttoned up, does it stay or does it pull inappropriately? Does the tie start to look like it's choking you a little bit more? So it's a good idea to kind of practice when you're wearing that attire, especially if it's not something that you normally would wear as a day-to-day. And then one bottom line, I would say, especially again for women, is be comfortable in those shoes. While we want to cover up our toes and heels at all times, we want to be comfortable, because you simply never know how many miles you may have to walk to the next corporate boardroom, or how long you'll have to be on your feet interacting, because this is a stand and greet event and there aren't any seats present, to sit down. So the worst thing is to have those pinched toes or those uncomfortable heels that you're wearing. And you have to find your own sense of style and comfort, because as much as we've indicated, you present yourself differently when you're wearing the clothes. You want to present yourself in the best way possible that kind of reflects you in the way in which you can carry forward. Gina, I don't know if you have any other, oh, I'm so sorry. I don't know if you have any other comments about what's here. I'm not going to go through each little arrow pointing to the image. That's just to illustrate, but.
Well, the shoes thing got me last week.
Does every time.
I'd always been comfortable in, suddenly we're not comfortable with for some reason. But the other thing I would say is, especially the whole checking yourself in the mirror issue is, remember, you're not only representing yourself,
Mm-hmm.
how you're, you know, dressing and whatnot, but you're representing the company that you work for, your employer. And so, ask yourself when you're looking in the mirror, is this how my employer wants me to look for the position that I'm in? So, uh, I think that might help people when they think about it that way as well.
Absolutely. And if you're a small business owner, right, this reflects upon your business and would people want to do business with you. And how are you reflecting in that light as well, for sure. Absolutely. And your industry, your environment, and are you gonna be taken seriously? Right, when you're speaking, or you're receiving an award, or you are out there to network and build that base, or simply find new leads for yourself. You want to be taken seriously and have that best image, and how you present yourself really does matter. It's sometimes an unfortunate downside to our environment because we know that who we are is much deeper than the clothes that we wear. That's absolutely true. However, that first initial look is what folks will see. And then in order for them to get past that, you want to at least have presented yourself with that initial kind of gateway, if you will. And our next conversation topic is the handshake. Oh, my most favorite thing ever. As a germaphobe, this is a challenge for me. I have to admit, it really is. And I'm not sure if you folks are aware, but Jana, a quiz for you.
Oh,
Do you know where this originated?
where the handshake originated? I do not.
How long ago?
Um,
It'll throw you. It'll throw you.
50.
Fur, fur, further back. Further back. This always kind of amazes me every time I see it in writing, but this originates from the Middle Ages. Um, right. So it was to make sure that the person that we're meeting with was a friend and not an enemy. So the handshake is indicating that friendship. So what we were doing is we were opening our hand, right? Showing that we don't have any weapons. And then in respect, the individual we're meeting with was also showing their hand to indicate they didn't have any weapons. And then we connected that to cement our friendship.
Wow, that's very interesting.
I always find that so interesting to do that. So it is something rooted deep, deep, deep within kind of just historical context, which I think is cool.
Because
Um,
it's leading to the fist pump, doesn't
it,
it?
um, I like that fist bump so much better. Um, but I like it when I think about it too. It's like showing that we don't have any weapons, which is another reason when you shake hands, because this also stems from the Middle Ages, that when you extend, and we always shake with our right hand, that your left hand is not stuck in your pocket. It's okay if it's holding something, because a lot of times we're at networking events and we're, either holding our binders or we're holding our coffee mug or something like that's fine because it's open and people can see that. But dating back to that Middle Ages historical context, if your left hand is in your pocket, that's suspicious. So you were no longer seen as open and friendly and sincere. So make sure that left hand is visible, but we always shake with our right hand. Um, so there are kind of three steps to the handshake. There's the initiation, which is putting your hand out to indicate that you are, again, weapon free, if you will. And you should do this during the introduction or when you are about to speak or prior to speaking at first. And you should lean in a little bit, kind of showing that you're willing to, be friends with this individual. And that kind of, again, indicates that sense of sincerity. And then the grasp. One thing about the grasp is if you look at your hand and we have this little web part that connects our thumb with our forefinger, right? This is called the web of our hand. And what we want to do is we want to make web to web contact so that your web hits the web of the individual that you're shaking hands with. And that's firm and that you are making that strong kind of contact. So if you kind of see the image here as portrayed, it really is making that firm, solid connection between the two hands in play to do that. And there's a little bit of, indicator here because we have all those what fish kind of hands where we're kind of just like holding the fingertips. We have the one where we're crushing, so we're known as the crusher, and we like literally squeeze the digits of the other person. Those are bad. Don't do those. Those are bad. We want to be solid. We want to be firm. We want to be friendly with our handshake. And then the motion, as listed here, is that it's about 2 to 3 pumps, right, of just that up and down motion on that handshake. And then after that, if we do more than that, we're seen as kind of nervous or kind of a little not good. So we want to do only 2 to 3 pumps. And there's lots of things to be said about the handshake, whether it's female to female, male to male, male to female, whoever it is, you do the same handshake. So a male does not do anything less with a female, meaning that they don't just grab their little fingertips because they think the female is a gentle soul. And a male to male, it's not a contest. We're not here to crush each other's hands in a form of dominance. We are, again, wanting to indicate that strong friendship base to do that. The handshake is also known as the confidence hug, right? So as much as when we hug people during moments of joy or during moments of comfort, that's exactly what that hug does, right? That physical hug, it gives that sense of assuredness. So the handshake is known as the confidence hug and how we do that. And then the post-COVID greeting I put on here. So this is where Jana was commenting on the fist bump. This one is something, again, situational. You'll have to kind of play it out. We still have indications where there'll be big signs, no handshaking, right? We don't want to do handshaking at this event. We might see those populate a little bit more during our cold and flu seasons that come up in the fall. No handshaking, not allowed. And sometimes in an environment, you simply want to do a fist bump. I think COVID has kind of taught us that it's okay now. People are still a little germ aware. And so putting that fist bump out, people are okay with that now. Prior to 2019, they might have thought that was a little strange and not appropriate, but I think now moving forward, it's okay to do that. And the last thing about a handshake, because we use our right hand to shake, try to carry things in your left hand, as the indicator here with the employee with the binder in that left hand. Try to keep everything in your left hand as much possible so that your right hand is always free and ready to shake. And Jana, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this. I know we go back and forth a lot about handshaking and, those after comments on who kind of squeezed our hand and who gave us that wet fish. So we've experienced it all, and I'm interested in your take on that.
I think you did a great description of what the handshake needs to consist of, and you should practice your handshake and get feedback from others on what you're doing with your handshake. I think post-COVID, we can say, well, I have no weapon. Well, you've got a million germs on your hands, so you kind of do have a weapon. It's just not to be, phobic about it or whatever, but you need to be aware. So, if you go to an event like that, make sure you wash your hands, afterwards. You can have a little alcohol, hand sanitizer, alcohol, hand sanitizer in your pockets, so that you can kind of, put that on your hands every once in a while. But again, just because you don't want to get sick. And this is pre-COVID. I
Oh
mean,
my gosh, sure.
this is forever. You've got cold and flu season, as Helen mentioned. You, that's where your sickness comes from most of the time in winter season. So, the other thing I would say is your name tag should match your handshake. So when you're taking the right hand, your name tag should be on that side so that you can kind of make eye contact with the name tag as well. So that would be my only input.
Absolutely. Thank you for reminding us about that name tag on the right side. That's important because that's where that eye will naturally go when extending the right hand for sure to do that. Um, and then, sometimes you're nervous, right? So sometimes that hand is getting all sweaty.
Yeah.
And it's a challenge because sometimes if you're at an event with a cold drink, and it's all, sweaty and clammy in your hand, you don't want to really reach out with a clammy hand to someone. So it's focused on using that left hand as much possible. And, sometimes there's a very stealth kind of, what do we call it? The stealth kind of side swipe where you kind of like before you reach to shake someone's hand, you kind of stealthily kind of slide your hand along your blazer jacket or your pants or your skirt and try to dry off as much of the clamminess as you can. The other option is to, grab a napkin that's nearby and wipe it and then, apologize. My hand might be a little cold. I've been holding on to this, ice water or something. And people will understand as opposed to being hit with a cold and clammy, sweaty kind of hand.
Yep.
So our next point of conversation is kind of that email versus phone call situation, which is kind of our two key ways in which we do communicate in the workplace still, right? So email is, some will call it the bane of our existence, and some will call it the whole purpose as to why we exist, because we have to have that email exchange going on. And then the phone, right? Notice how I have found a most appropriate rotary graphic, which is probably if you're under whatever age, a millennial or Gen Z in the room, you probably don't even know what that crazy device is there, but that is a phone. So kind of indicating the office phone or the landline that some of us still have, or you could put your cell phone in there as well. So Jana, any initial thoughts on email v phone?
Uh, yes, I would say one of the first things to think about is which is the appropriate means for the message you need to share. So sometimes email is preferred if one needs to document an exchange or a response, then email is going to be preferred for you. Um, if it's a more complicated topic where you need to share information, email might be good. I would say for phone calls, when it's a more personal nature, then you probably need to have a conversation and maybe even face to face, not even a phone call at that point.
Absolutely.
And I always tell people smile when you're on the phone because you can hear that through the phone. And so you have more work to do when you're in email and phone calls because the recipient doesn't have the benefit of your nonverbals. So emails are easy to offend, and phone calls, it's easy to convey that you're disinterested.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The email does create that kind of thread. So if you need things, as Jana said, kind of documented or kind of a historical, change of agenda, for example, you want to keep that in a thread going on. Email's also good if you're obviously hoping to reach a large number of, constituents and you want to, blast something out to them and give information to many at one time. Um, and the phone is kind of, as Jana said, kind of that confidential kind of piece where you simply, maybe it's really, really urgent and a phone is the best way to, get somebody, you know, to meet with you right now or to share some, confidence information that's needed. And it also builds relationship. People still like the phone, or as Jana mentioned, even a face-to-face, do you have a few minutes to meet me in the break room or do you want to go grab a coffee? And then you have that face-to-face kind of interaction as well. And then in addition to this, we have texting, right? So A lot of our business interaction is done through texting, but as Jana also mentioned, that's probably one of the other places where tone is kind of not always understood. We have lack of punctuation. That's a format of texting. We have people who could be over emoji users, and now there's a whole kind of stream of thought about when you use those emojis, that's really kind of falsifying your message. So a lot of different messages behind the messages in that regard. And definitely know your audience, know what you're trying to convey, um, and what is the way in which your audience wants to get a hold of you, right? So if you're dealing with an older clientele, they may not do texting and they definitely may not understand what that is. They may want a phone call. They may simply still want a US mail piece sent out to them. Whether it's a postcard or a handwritten invitation or something like that. If you're interacting with, our Gen Zs or our iGens, texting is the way to go with them. They find phone as kind of invasive and they're not going to answer, messages, etc. So you have to meet your audience, know what you're trying to convey, and find the right uh, format that will work in that regard. And sometimes you have to do multiples. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes you have to do a little bit of each in different ways and kind of shift that message to get it across as needed.
And the points you bring up make me think of the, how do I say this? The almost forcing companies, agencies that force the online exchange. And I've dealt with this a lot with my dad. He's 93. He doesn't have email. He doesn't. He doesn't text. He doesn't know how to use a website. There are a lot that, the baby boomers are the biggest generation in our country right now. And all of these companies that are forcing this technological way of communicating is extremely difficult for people who are older. They don't know how to do these things. But companies are forcing it.
Yes.
It's not a good situation for some of those people. For my dad to sit on a phone on hold, pushing buttons for push one for this, push two for that. He just gives up. He gives up within 2 minutes. I can't imagine older people who are out there in the world who don't have a younger person to help them navigate these things. So keep that in mind with your business and with your customer interactions. Not everyone has email. Not everybody has texting ability. So
Absolutely. And Jana, as you're mentioning that, I just totally, and probably your head as well, how about when we had to make those COVID vaccination appointments and the elderly were the first, allowed in line, so to speak, but how did they have to make those appointments? Online. And how did so many of them either not have a computer or not have an account or not understand that literally what was going on is they were hiring college students to be in these banks and like assist our seniors and our elderly make those appointments because the mechanism, to remedy the situation was causing more situation. And, it was a crazy.
agencies have done this now. So again, with my dad, this is becoming very salient to me, but you cannot reach Social Security other than through this automated phone system. So it's 30 years from now, this will be okay. It's not okay right now.
It's not okay, right? And you're right. We have so many different generations out there and so many different styles of communicating. And that goes along with the lingo that's used, the emojis, as we mentioned, that's used, the style. There's a whole kind of catalyst that goes into how we construct a message and the verbiage that we use and the images, from infographics to memes to solid static pictures to get the message across. So as that business owner, as that professional, even within your workplace, think about the generations that you have within your workplace and how some of your employees will respond to one side of messaging, others will respond to another. And we challenge ourselves with this in the university all the time. We have to put things on social media, we have to put things, and then what format of social media do we use, right? So there's that element. Then we have to do things with, like direct class announcements, and we still have print posters and mailers and things. So you just have to continually do a little bit of everything to reach the largest base. If you depend on only one, sometimes you're not going to reach anyone.
And that's an important point to just appreciate. Um, just appreciate that not everyone has the technological abilities that you have.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Patience is in order there.
And then you're still adhering to that level of professionalism on the message that you're sending. And how you're changing it up dependent on the format that you're sending that message. So it kind of keeps us constantly on our toes in terms of how we are getting out there and making sure that others know what they need to know in the time fashion that they need to know it. And getting along with others, I know a lot of this we probably kind of touched on. This might kind of summarize that a little bit for us. Um, so we talked about those good manners, please, thank you, good morning. If you're within really eyesight to arm's length of someone, even when passing in the hallway or on a sidewalk, walking into your building, you say good morning um, or you say hello, something of that nature. So it just kind of creates the element of humanness, if you will. Uh, Being genuine, kind of being authentic. I think we all know the fakes in our life and our workplace who kind of look through us rather than looking at us. And we don't want to be that person, right? We want to create an element of being genuine, um, being supportive, uh, being interested in others, right? Others have a story that they want to tell you. Um, and just kind of creating that authenticity. It's key. It's important because it all comes back to us in terms of how others see us as a professional. I put here that the third little point, wait, kind of a reminder that kind of spirals in your head. Anybody, Jana, do you know what WAIT stands for? Is that acronym?
I do not.
So
Okay, guessing a point.
I'm giving you all your Jeopardy answers. So when you score big in those game shows that you're gonna be on, remember I get a percentage when asked these questions. So wait means why am I talking?
Nice. I like it.
You kind of like let that other person talk before you jump in there. Again, listening, seek first to understand. We talked a lot about differences and acceptance and awareness. Um, Ask something important to the other person. Sometimes when you left for the weekend, somebody indicated they were going to be in a softball tournament on Sunday, or their son was going to be visiting colleges or something. When you get back to the office place or you get back to the neighborhood uh, interaction or whatnot, just kind of say, hey, how did that go for you on Sunday? Or how was that softball tournament? Did you all win? Something like that. So you kind of already are indicating you care about that person and it's a good conversation starter as well. Practice kindness, just being kind, being charitable when you can, sharing something, helping others as much as holding a door open to somebody, that all matters. And then having that good sense of humor, being a little bit lighthearted in the sense of it's all going to be okay. Not everything is a catastrophe. Otherwise, if we think everything is, then we won't really know when something truly is catastrophic. So just having a good sense of humor, an appropriate sense of humor, laugh a little bit, smile a lot in the workplace. And then turn off that phone when interacting with others or in meetings, avoiding those distractions. And I know in our technological world, this is hard. This is hard for students in our classes. This is hard for all these networking events that we go to because we have to be on with our office all the time. But especially when somebody is engaging with you or conversing with you, give them that due respect instead of looking like everything else is more important than they are by constantly checking that phone and that sort of thing. So again, situational. There are going to be times when there is going to be an urgent, either familial or workplace situation where you'll have to excuse yourself for a moment. Um, but just the constant, like, I'm bored with what you're saying. Let me check my phone. Maybe somebody more interesting is, posting or something. So we want to avoid that. We want to give due respect to the people that are face to face with us in that environment. And Jane, I don't know if you have comments on those points as well. Again, somewhat common, but sometimes just good for all of us to be reminded of.
Absolutely. I, so I would add, everyone's favorite topic is themselves. So when you're trying to, make connections with someone, asking them things about themselves, that is something that is easy for most people to talk about. The other thing I would say is everyone's favorite word is their name. And so, using someone's name when you're talking to them, learning names of people that you work with or interact with, is it's just incredibly powerful to know people's names. Um, so those would be the two things I would add to that.
Those are excellent points. I love those and absolutely very true for sure. Um, yes, people do love talking about themselves and they love hearing their name and that you know their name for
I
sure.
mean, themselves is the topic that they know the best, obviously, and everybody wants to share their story. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
This is meeting tips. Think we can move through this. I think we kind of talked about this already, or in some regards, we'll just we talked about being on time, being a few minutes early, because that really is on time. The appropriate dress in the meeting, whether you're conducting the meeting, you called the meeting, or you're attending the meeting. And if you're the attendant, it definitely shows due respect to that person who called the meeting interaction. Um, this is where you can get there a few minutes early and maybe mingle a little bit. Even if there's a water station or coffee station, kind of allows you to kind of stretch and work out some of those nerves before you have to do your presentation role in the meeting. Just do some niceties and mingle a little bit. Ask a few, how are you doing questions? How was your weekend? That sort of thing. Come prepared and be aware. Uh, as best you can. Sometimes in our lives, meetings are called at the last minute and everyone's in a flurry and not quite sure what's going to happen or what's going to shake out here. But if you were sent an agenda ahead of time, if you were asked to have a few talking points for your department or for your business, be prepared with that. A lot of our chamber interactions, for example, we're called upon to give a little 30 seconds of who you are, what you do, what you're looking for, et cetera. So be prepared to kind of say that. And then be concise when it's your turn to talk. Again, sometimes you're very limited. You have 30 seconds, you have 2 minutes. Get to the point, repeat the point, and be done with the point. And there we are. Uh, Unless it's a luncheon or breakfast kind of meeting where food will be served, this is, avoid bringing in your own kind of snacks. Water, coffee is okay. That's pretty common these days, usually gets served at minimum, or people oftentimes walk in with their own. And feel free to stay hydrated, right? That helps us stay awake during meetings. It helps us alert and active, and it helps us kind of keep our salivary glands going for conversations, etc. Again, keeping your phone off, out of sight, not very noticeable. And that would also go with maintaining the rules of order. Sometimes you're instructed, do not bring your phone, do not open your laptop. We're going to just do things on paper in here. And you have to be very respectful of that environment. And you might be the one calling those meetings to set those rules. And then the last one here is asking questions at the appropriate time. So if there's a call to take a pause for, point 3 on the agenda, ask that question that relates to that rather than waiting till the end and batch loading all the questions going back in history and time. Do your best to ask at the appropriate time. And if you can't, or if time is called, um, contact the moderator either by email or ask if they have a few minutes after the meeting um, if you feel that there's some questions or concerns that you still have to have addressed. And I don't know, Jane, if you've been, we've been through many meetings, sometimes multiples in a day. Um, and I hope we've adhered to all these tips here, but we can always have room to improve.
So we're not going to talk about how to hide when you're texting?
The under the table text, yes. We've all been known to do that as well. Yeah.
I think I would add asking appropriate questions. So,
mm,
for instance, if you're in a meeting where there's just a general discussion of a topic that you have not been, that you're not aware of at that point, um, maybe that's a question to have after the meeting one-on-one with someone, like, hey, what was this all about? Catch up the speed instead of expecting everyone in the room who is already aware of it to sit there for a 10-minute overview of the topic just for you. So some questions, they don't need to be asked in that meeting. They can be asked at a later point in time. So that goes back to just respecting the people. I think you're right. All of these things that we've been talking about this whole time play into the meeting etiquette.
absolutely. They all definitely do intertwine and work together as opposed to working in opposition.
Right.
Then we have some conversation topics. Just, sometimes when you're doing that mingling before a meeting starts, or there's a lunch break in a full day agenda, or you're simply at, again, we mentioned being at one of those chamber events and you're there to kind of build your clientele or introduce your business. We always need a little conversation starter sometimes. And these are just uh, simple ones. There's so many more we can talk about as well. Everything from, again, if there's food being served or a beverage of choice, it's a good kind of walking up to somebody and say, have you tried the whatever? Have you been to the buffet table yet? Or something like that. Um, you can ask somebody what kinds of projects they have lined up or what's new in their department. For example, if it's a large corporate environment. You can say, have you tried fill in the blank? Again, it could be a food item, it could be a new app for the workplace or something, or have you seen something? It could have been like the lunar eclipse. Did you happen to see the lunar eclipse this past weekend or something like that? You could ask somebody what they're hoping to get out of today's meeting, or if you're at a conference or a longer set of sessions, how are you enjoying it? Did you go to fill in the blank session this morning or something like that? Always offering a compliment, just simply telling someone, I like your whatever. I really like your scarf. I like your coffee mug. And did you get that here? Or did you make that yourself on Etsy or something like that? I mean, you have different conversation ways to get started. People like compliments when you tell them that they like something they're wearing or carrying, and then they usually have a story about it. Maybe what are your plans for the weekend? Holidays get a little touchy, right? Because you might be approaching that holiday season, and because you celebrate Christmas doesn't mean that someone else is. So you might want to play that one close to the vest, if you will. Um, Thanksgiving is kind of known as like the national holiday where everyone's showing gratitude and being blessed and those kinds of things. But those holidays are a little touchy, and sometimes because they involve, families, or they involve expense, or they involve, you kind of want to play that one a little bit carefully, for the most part, until you really know your audience base. But a lot of times a weekend, or a 3-day kind of away from the workplace, kind of interesting. Any summer travel plans? Same kind of idea. People are, usually doing something for the summer, or what do people simply like to do as the seasons change? You could act as we move from summer to fall, or fall to spring. And then this one's kind of fun. When you see somebody kind of in that environment who's kind of looking like they're as panicked, or kind of withdrawing from, or they're just kind of sitting there by themselves, kind of if you kind of go over to them and break the ice, and you can kind of just say, I really hate networking, don't you? And it kind of like lightens the mood a little bit. And somebody might say, oh my gosh, this is so hard for me. And then you just break into a casual conversation. So it's kind of that idea of misery loves company, and kind of like being aware of kind of those social norms, and maybe allowing somebody who is withdrawing from the environment to pull them back in, because they needed that bit of comfort as a kind person. And you just never know where it might take you. So Jana, any comments on that conversational?
My addition would be, and you've alluded to it a little bit, that there are some topics that you probably want to avoid. So you've mentioned a few. I'll just add things like politics,
Hmm.
hot button topics, social hot button topics. You probably want to avoid those types of things. And this goes back again to uh, being aware that not everyone has your lens of the world. And so
Absolutely.
some of those topics that are just really divisive, or can lead to confrontation, you probably want to avoid those. That's not a good conversation topic.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Even something as innocuous as saying, "Did you vote today?" could just kind of spiral into a negative. So, um, kind of want to avoid those kinds of situations. Absolutely. Religion is another one. That's a little bit harder to draw to somebody, but really politics, religion, um, pay raise, if it's kind of that time in your cycle where everyone's gonna, get their annual, hey, did you get your raise yet? You don't want to talk about that either. Things of that nature for sure. Keep it gentle, keep it casual, keep it where the other person can respond to you, as opposed to simply doing a head nod or saying yes or no, because this is how you want to build that network and kind of be able to practice your conversational acuity.
I always considered weather to be a safe topic, but I don't know that that's even the case anymore because I'll say something like, "Isn't it a beautiful day?" Well, I prefer when it's hot. Or
Right.
I prefer I prefer winter, or whatever. So, but it's still a conversation, so it is a great conversation starter.
It is. And it's something that we're all kind of out there doing right now. So
We're all in it together.
we're all in it together for the weather. Oh, that's our last one, Jana.
Oh,
Um, this was kind of just open conversation, or ideas, follow up that we might have that we haven't touched on. Again, etiquette is um, it's very wide and varied and intertwined. It really boils down to um, you know really just self-respect and respect to others. And y- sometimes, you're still going to um, make a little bit of a faux pas, simply for whatever reason. It wasn't intentional. We never go into it with being as an intention of doing something wrong. It simply happens, or you misread the circumstance, or um, you misread the conversation that someone else was beginning, and if you step up to it and you own it and you apologize, that's part of being a professional, and that's part of good etiquette as well. Um, and always, 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 as I tell my students, every class, every day, every moment, be kind. The world simply needs more kindness above anything else. And if you're kind, then everything almost genuinely will fall into place.
Great closing comment. Yep, let's just start trying to take care of each other instead of what's happening now.
Absolutely.
We're very much individually focused right now, so um, spreading the kindness is definitely a good thing. So thank you so much for being here to talk about this topic with me. And this was a lot of great information for our um, fellow professionals in the area. So I'm sure that those who watch will get some great tips. And I will sign off with that thought. Everyone, if you need any help from us, we're at IU Northwest. It's in Gary, Indiana. The email, or well, I'll give you the website. You can reach us through www.iun.edu/SBA. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.